Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the session of Introduction to Python Program. So we'll first look at what we have covered last time very briefly, and then we'll continue with today's topics. So the very first thing that I want to highlight today, we are going to use two interfaces. In the beginning, I'm using the Python default idle environment, which means when you install standard Python in your machine, you should get the standard idle environment. And that's what I'm going to use in the first few sessions. And after that, we will also going to look at Jupyter Notebooks, a notebook-like interface where Python is quite popular. The Python development is quite popular in this fashion, especially if your aim is to work towards data analytics. This is quite popular. Now there are two implementations I'm going to use. One is Google Colab. That means already if you have a Google email address, then you have like Gmail, you have access to the Google Colab environment where you can access the Jupyter Notebook installation there in the cloud service. Or else if you want to work with the offline, there's a tool we have, Jupyter Lab, which will install in your local machine. Right, so these are the two software tools that I actually plan to use. Right. Then we were discussing why Python is popular. There are a lot of features that we have discussed. Then also we have looked at there are two modes where we can use in Python. One is like a calculator. We can make use of shell where to type very short commands, just check out, right, the commands and so on. But if you want to write a very lengthy program, then you have to write it as a script. So those are the things that we have discussed first in the previous session. Now, once after that, we also look at the basic commands available. And first we learn how to make use of help. Now, with the help function in Python, whenever you want to know more details about the particular functionality, you can use help. Within the bracket, you can name the function name. And if you just type help without anything, then you will get a general help. The next thing that we have discussed is how variables as well as the numbers are represented inside Python. We discussed there are few types of numbers available like integer, int, floating point, float, and complex numbers. And at the same time, we can use type functions to know what the data type. So like in C, for example, you don't have to define your variables in the beginning in Python. Python automatically assigns the required data type. But if you want to check it, you can use type function. And then for strings, we discussed there are two representations. Either you can use a single quote or double quotes. And we discussed why both representation. Now, for example, if the single quotation is a part of the string, then better to go for double quotes. And if the double quotes is a part of the string, then go for single quotes. That's the simple use of two representations. But then we also discuss multi-line strings. If you want to have multiple lines, then the usage is you will use 3 single quotes or 3 double quotes. Okay, and then we also discuss some of the examples. Now that's about the numbers. Basically, they are constant, will not change during the program execution. But when it comes to manipulation, especially we need variables as well to hold numbers, to work with the equations and solve them and so on. So variables are important. And when you create variable, there are some rules you need to follow, right? And then we discuss in Python, keywords cannot be used as names of variables. So for variable names, you cannot use keywords. Make a note of this one. Then we discuss the assignment. and also the Python statements. And then we looked at arithmetic operators, right? So these are the set of operators available. And then we have to think about the order of operations, especially when you solve like in mathematics. Then we also look at some of the examples. And finally, we were looking at, operation on string. So usually arithmetic operations will not work with string values, but except but two other, operators. In this particular case, addition of two in string. The addition will actually glue the two strings together, which we call string concatenation. And the multiplication, that means the string multiply with the some integer value. Basically, it will make to repeat that string. So fun into 3, you will get fun, 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 right? So this is where we have stopped last time. So let's start today's discussion by looking at the type converter functions. I think one of the questions that you have seen there. So let me start from the beginning. Now, to start with, I'm going to share my whole screen. So screen 2, and then let me check. Right? Let me check. We'll open up idle. So in my machine, so it's installed with Python. I have a couple of versions. I have installed the Python last time as well. So let me click the newest version. In my case, we have Python 3.10, 3.10, and then I'm click on the idle. Right now, here is my idle, and you can try the commands that we have tried last time, like printing some message, right? So this we have already discussed. And then we also talk about the type function type, right? Give us now, for example, if you say type hello, now Python recognize this as a string class. Then we have numbers, like if you take 3.14, so this is taken as a floating point number. If you type 3.14 type, it will say floating point number. Now the converter function can convert them. Now, for example, we can say, okay, int 3.14. Now what will happen here? It will give you the integer component of this number. So that means 3. Similarly, if you say 3.999, you still get 3 because it will not rounding off, just extract integer part of it and you will get it as the answer. Right now, similarly, this will work for this one as well. Yes, it's a string. The 3 is a string. You see quotes there, but then again, you can convert it to integer value. So conversion is important. Now, similarly, if you take float, and if you have an int value like 70, you see it will convert it to floating point number by assigning the decimal place. In this case, we have a 17 point and then 0. Right. Okay, now similarly, you can try this one, 17.0. Right now, this is an error. So it's because we have A is missing. We have A below 80, but then it will basically just remove whatever inside here and we will get 17.0, right? But if you use this way, this will not work. 17, right? And then it will convert into 17.0, right? Then int will get 17.0, right? Then it will be a value. So remember that knowing this is important because we will discuss today, especially when we get user inputs. User inputs we'll get as a string value, and then we need to convert it to a number to, for example, addition. Now, similarly, you can use a string function as well. So for example, if you have a string and then integer value like this, it will convert into a string value by including a single quote here, right? And similarly, if you have a decimal number with a decimal value, it will also include it as a single quote, right? So try these various ones. The usage we are going to discuss very soon once we get to input and output, especially when we want to get input from the user. So if you want to know more details about this, you can use help. For example, when you say int, it says help int, you will get details. So we can say int x, you will get integer int x base 10, right? So you can give a base if you want. And then here actually this int will actually gives you the class int, but not the method int here, right? So in this particular case, it's the class int, not the method int. Okay, if you have done up to this point, can you please raise your hands in the Zoom so that we can move to the next one? So I will show you the. Okay, so what you need to remember is whenever you need to convert among these different data types, you can use the converter functions. The three converter functions we have just discussed are int, float, and string. Right. Okay. Thanks. Please, you can lower your hand now. So my session today, I'm focusing more on input and output, and also for algorithm design part of it. Right, depending on the time permits, I can also look at control structures. Hopefully we can start with if statements. Right, now let me start with the input and output. Under this one, I'm going to talk about the simple input output and also formatted output. Formatted means especially when you want to present some data, so you can process it to some kind of a format. So that we are going to discuss under formatted output. Right. The first one, input. I'll go with ID. So I'm going to go to select ID. Now in ID, usually if you just put input, see what will happen. If you just put input, it will wait. It will not go to the prompt again. It will wait for something. And you can just type something like, let me say dialog, right? It will take as it is. Now, if you want to display something back to user, what to enter? Okay, enter your name. So that can be included as a parameter for the input function. So if you type in this format, what will happen? You will see there will be a message and there was a blinking cursor, user now know user has to type the name, right? So I'm going to add again dialog, and it will take the input. Now, if you want to like hold the value for further processing, so then you can assign it to a variable. Let's say a name. So I'm going to say name input, enter your name. So what will happen here now? So when you enter, right, you can enter your name. When you type enter your name, right, that will store in the variable name. So let me say dialog. Now it will not display, but you can say print name. Okay. Or else you can add something like hello. Yes. You know, you can further manipulate this. So I hope now you are clear. In Python, we have to use input function to get user input, whatever you want to get it from the user, and the message you will give it as a parameter. Right. Okay. Now, if you take the type of name, you will see it's a string value. Now, if you want to get a number, let's say, okay, I want to get a number. So let me type like this. Okay, I want to get a number in. I can say, okay, input, enter a number, right? So when you press enter, you can type some number and it will store there. If you say print in, it will print as a 23, but if you look at the type in, it will string the string. So remember we talked about the converter functions earlier, where you can convert whatever user enters into a number. So you can either use int or float. So let me update the previous one again. So I will go here. So I'm going to update this with int. So I'm going to convert this input to a integer value, right? So we will enter. So let me say 23 this time. So when you say print in, you will get 23. But this time, if you type in, so it says it's an integer value. So remember, so depend on what you need, you can decide whether you have to decide whether you need to include input or input together with some converter functions. So that's what I said. Now in here, we don't have any function. We just use input and you can type your name. So it will take it as a string. Now similarly here, if you want to convert it, so after the input, you will have int. Okay, any questions? If you have finished up to this point, can you please raise your hand so that I can move to the next one? Okay, thanks everyone. You can lower your hands. Thanks. Now that's about the input. So whenever you need to get some user input, we can use input function depending on what you need to get from the user, whether it's a message or whether it's your number, you have to use different converter functions. Right. Now, let's look at the output. Now, when you talk about the output, right, whatever you get from the user, you can easily put it to output. You can use print function, and then you can have any object you need to print, or you can have some variables to print and so on. So simply you can print will do the work, right? So this is exactly what we have seen earlier as well, right? If you take idle again, right? So previously I have taken name, right? And then you type some name, and then you take a number. So you have two values. So simply now you can say print. You can say print name, or you can say, okay, print name, comma, in. So that's also possible, right? Simple print would do the job. But let's take, you need to have more advanced usage of this. Let me discuss how we could do. Now, simply we can have a equals 10, 20, b equals 15. Right now, you can talk about printing a will give you 28, but print a comma b, you have 28 and 50. And let's say you want to comma separate. Now, when you have a comma b, print a comma b, usually you have a number. In between, you have a space, right? If you take help, it will tell you this. If you say help print, now it says, okay, CP string inserted between the value, default is the space. So this is a space, right? If you have not, you just type something, in between you have this. Now, to change.
Excuse me, sir.
Right?
Just want
Yes.
to know regarding the print one. Now we just use the variables for print name into name comma n. So
Yeah.
if you want to put the multiplication, let's say I want to print the name into n number of times, both are variables. How does it that work?
Yeah, I mean, like you mean this one. Now,
You want to put your
printing
name
like,
into 3 or 4 times.
yeah, name into
Two
3. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so it will work without any issue, because Python recognize name is a string value and 3 is a number. So when a string multiply with the number, it will print in the repetition, right? Simply, if you say name into n, again, what will happen here? Name is a string value and n is a number, right? So it will the repeat. So depending on what you have, you can have it there.
Right.
Right. Thanks for asking questions. So you better ask questions, because otherwise, one thing is better to know in detail, right? So whenever you have a question, so you can directly interrupt me and let me know the question. Right. And then when I say comma separate, what will happen? You can have different now. Name is a string value and n is a number. So that's possible. So actually you can have mixed types, right? And then another one, now, for example, if you want to say that, okay, name is name, right? So I can type it like this. Now print, if I put name and name, what will be the output? Yes, I put a single quote. Okay, whenever you put a single quote, it's a string, right? The string display as it is. That's all. So you see that this one, it will print as it is, but this one is a variable, and inside the variable, we know that we have dialog inside. So in between, you will have a space. Similarly, if you say print n, comma n, yes, it says okay n, and the value of n is 23. So remember, when you use a single quote, now Python will treat it as a label or a text. Simply, it will print as it is. Any questions up to this? Are you comfortable with printing now? Now, for example, I can type something like this. Now, let me take a new window. I'm going to take file, new window to create a module. And then I'm going to split the screen. The window, I will put it to one side. And then this text, the shell is other side. So what I actually did is I use window key and arrow keys to separate the screen into exactly two parts. Okay, now I'm going to do this. So let me say, okay, print. I'm going to say, okay, dialog, print program. And then we will say, okay, introduction to Python. Right, now let me save this. Now here, I'm going to write this as a script. So I have typed in a new window. I got file, new window. And inside the new window, I type two command. So the next step is you need to save this. So I'm going to save. Right, so we have a dialog. So let me say, okay, print this statement. So when you save it and if you run it, run module, you will see output here, dialog training program and introduction to Python. So it will be there. Now, if you want a space in between, there are many methods again. Simply, you can just use print. Right? When you say print, open bracket and close bracket, so that's insert an empty line. So let me show you. Right now, the output is like this. So when you say run module, so in between two lines, you have a space. Okay. If you have finished up to that point, please raise your hands.
How to include a comment? What's the code there? Hello.
If I explain again, so what I did, I created a new script by selecting file, new file. And within that, I actually entered two print statement. If when I insert the two print statement without this print, right, the lines will be like that. There's no space in between. But if you enter like just print, then it will add a space. The other technique is to make a space. I will take a copy of this. right? Right. I will have, like this, and I will remove this one. So I will put a print statement in between. Let's say print. I'll have some dash lines. Right. So if I run it, run module, you will see that the first two lines we have a space in between. The second lines we do not have any space. The other way is using escape characters. Right. This is, if you have already done C also, you might discuss this. This /in character we call, this is new line character. /in actually give you additional, right, additional new line in between. So when you just type dialog training program /in, it used to say that, oh, go to the next line. So let me run this again, run module. You see now in this one you have space. Now if you want to take two spaces, we can use print. Again, we have to put it like this. So if you run it now, you will see, right here we have two spaces in between. Now for that we have used print statement twice without empty parameters, arguments. And then here you can have another new line character. So now if you run it, now you will see you will have the same spacing, right? Two spaces. So these are like different ways of formatting your input. Now, if you want to develop a piece of Python, right, script to perform some tasks, so this idea could be used. Right. Any questions you might have? If you're clear, you can raise your hands. And if you're finished also.
So we can try the multiple line also similar way with the new line character.
Exactly. So since you have raised that one, so let me add another separator, right, like this. And you can have print, yes, multi-line. We have 3 single quotes or 3 double quotes, and then you can say Python training program. And then you can press enter twice for 2 spaces, and then you can have introduction to Python. And then you can complete with 3 single quotes like this. Good that you brought up that. So if I rerun it, now you see same output with 3 different ways. Maybe I can separate out, right? So this is the separator. Another one, okay. The first one we use just the print statement without any arguments. So we add the new space. And the second technique is we will use /in. We call escape characters represent the new line character. And the third one is just use them as a multi-line string. Okay, good that you have pointed out there. Okay, any questions up to this far? Okay, if you are ready, I can go to the next one. Shall we move to the next one then? Okay, you can lower your hands. Thanks. Anyone is having difficulties understanding this one? Right. The next one, I'm going to talk about the formatted output. Uh, there are many ways in Python we can actually use formatted output. For example, let's say you have a, a floating point number, a number with a lot of decimal places. Let's say we want to restrict into two decimal places. So let's going to look at how we are going to do this. Right. Now for that, I'm going to use shell. Now let me assume that my number, I'm going to say A is 1234.56789, some arbitrary number. So if you print A, it will print the number as it is. It will print number as it is. Then I'm going to first start with the string module operator, which means like percentage symbol. This is actually we normally call old way of representing numbers. Old way, right? Because similar syntax you will see in other programming languages as well. Now let me start. Let's say we have in this one, we are going to have a string. I will type whatever inside this string, and then you have a string module operator, right? This is the operator, and then you will list the number, right? So this is the format, and within here, within the string, you will type how exactly you need to represent the number. So simply I will say, okay, 7D. So here D represent integer values and 7 represent number of places. Right? So let me show you. If you just type it like this, now this is integer when you say D without any decimal places. So 1, 2, 3, 4. But with 7, it will allocate 7 spaces like places. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's not just 1, 2, 3, 4, right? If you want, you can try with some other numbers. Let's say, okay, 12D. So this is very, very important, especially when you write output to a file or you want to display it in a screen. So formatted string is very important. Okay, similarly, let's say we want to have it as a print, right? We will have 7.2 F. F means for floating point number like A. So what happens here? The 7 is number of places that you allocate. And after the point, we will say, okay, how many decimal places you need. And if you type this, you will see the number you will get is 1234.57. And remember, this is rounding off. It will round off the number. So it's limit to 2 decimal places. But if you calculate the number of places, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7, we have already indicated. So if you increase this one, you see the difference. Like, for example, if you put 12, now you will see the spaces. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. See, especially when you want to format a bill, for example, you can use this fashion. Any questions? If you're comfortable, I can go further. Finish up to this point. Right. Okay. So let me say, I want to say price. So this is a price, and let's say I want to include the term price there. So simply what you could do, you can say print. Within this formatting string, you can include whatever you want. Now, for example, I can say, okay, price in rupees, and then I can have formatting. Likewise. So now what will happen, it says, okay, file in rupees, okay, 1234.57. Last one under this one, if you have multiple values, right, let me show you. Now I'm going to have multiple values. The first one, I'm going to make it in 2 decimal places. And the second one, I'm going to have it with 1 decimal places. So that means the value, you have to put 2 values. And when you're putting 2 values, remember that you use normal brackets. Like in this case, I'm going to use the same value again and again. This is called a tuple. We will discuss this idea later on. For the time being, you can assume that whatever the values that you want to display, you can put them into a tuple with a normal bracket and the values. So that value format will represent using this formatting string. So what it says, okay, it says, okay, this one with 2 decimal places and then 1 decimal place. So let's see how it will work. You see 1234.57 and 1234.6. So that is how we can represent the formatted string using string module operator, or else we say this is the old-fashioned way of accessing or printing a number. If you have complete up to this point, can you please raise your hands so I know? Ravindu, were you able to finish? Naomi? About Vajini? So this is already given in the handout, and also like I have put there, we have to look for the details. Right. Let me move on to the next one. I have not seen Menaka. Are you okay? Taranga, Upendra?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, finished. Okay. So hope everyone got. Okay, let's move to the next one. Use of string format. Another way of representing. This is for your information because we want to cover the topic. But most of the time, general print would be enough for us. But I think to complete the Python syntax, I thought of covering all these. Okay, now you can lower the hand. Thanks. So let me move to the next one. Use of format method. I'm going to discuss format method, right? Use of format. Now, similar to previous one, you will have a formatting string, and with dot format, we can work on, representing the output. Right? So let me explain again. Now, in this one, within curly brackets, what you see is we call it the placeholders. Now, with these curly brackets, you can simply have, placeholder, we normally call it. And then you can simply have curly brackets. And then you can have indexes like 0 and 1. You see here 0 and 1 as well, right? Or else you can also have the names within the bracket, right? Let me show you, right? I will start with the shell again. Now let's take the previous one again and have A. That means we have 1, 2, 3, 4.5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now in this one, what we could do is we can say print, and then we will have formatting string if you want, or else you can just have, let's say, price rs, right? And then we can have simply curly brackets like this, and dot format, and then we can have the variable like a here, right? So there are a couple of possibilities. One is use of plain brackets like this. The next one is you can have the name inside like A. Oh, sorry. Or else we can have the index value, that is, let's say 0. Right? Now, index value is important when you have multiple values. Like, let's say we have A, this one. Let's say B. Let's say we have 3.14, something like this. Now we can say that, okay, print, I'm going to have multiple values. That means we can have bracket and bracket. This is the simplest way to do. And then we can say dot format, right? Within brackets, we can say A comma B, right? So we have the two numbers. Now, the next one is we can have 0 and 1. 0 means the first one, the index. 1 is the second one. So if you put it like this, there's no change. But what if you change it, you can change the order, right? Now you see the difference here. So when you put 0, that is the first value. When you say 1, it's the second value. But when you say 1, it will be the second value and then first one. So these are like some of the ways that you can represent. Now, similarly, we can give the notations that we have discussed earlier. Like we can say, okay, so this should be 7D, and then this should be maybe 5D. Sorry, I made the mistake again. Because it's a floating point number, so maybe I will go back. If, okay, 2 decimal places when we put 7.2 F, right? And let me say, okay, here, let me say 7.1 F. Okay, now it works. So similarly, what we have seen earlier, we can use the same way but slightly different notation. So why I actually explained to you this, because when you read Python coding, especially when you're looking at the formatted output, so some prefer to have the old fashion of use of string modulo operator. Some use these newer versions, right? And we should know both, right? Okay, so that's about, now I have discussed two ways of representing, right? One way is use of string modulo operator, like in previous case. And then secondly, use of format method, the two techniques. Now, the last way I will discuss the newest way of printing in Python, use of F string. Now, it's something like this. Now, you can have print, and then you will have a F, right? And then within that one, you can,
even the one.
right? Now, for example, here we can say F price, right? And then we can have let's say A, right? So F string, or either you can use simple F or capital F. So for example, if I take F again, I can say, okay, price is A and B. Likewise, you can have, this is the newest way of representing numbers, sorry, formatted output. You don't have to actually stick on to any of this. You can decide on the way you want. But remember, when you're reading especially, you should know how to, understand what is in the code. So F strings are important. So we discussed 3 ways of doing this now, right? Now, if I compare this, so we can simply say A comma B, you can have the places, the string modulo, and then format, and finally F string. So these are the 3 possible ways that you can format the strings, especially when you want to create files, as well as when you want to put something on the screen with the required spacing, then we can make use of these. Okay. If you finish up to this point, can you please raise your hands? Okay, so we can see Tarindu finished, Tanuja finished. Right, thanks. You can lower the hands. So that's about the formatted output. So we discussed 3 ways: use of string module operator, and formatting, format, and also use of string. Right. Now that we have learned how to use them, I want everyone to develop this small program, Python program. Right. Now we have discussed different ways of representing this. Now the first one, in this Python program, I want you to request person name and the date of birth, and then output a message with his name and his date of birth. Now, for example, you will see in the first line, the program requests the first name, and the second line, it will request the last name. So the input values are given in blue color, you see Chuck Norris. And then you request month, day, and year. And finally, you print complete message with person's name and date of birth. It's a very simple Python program. Now, can you tell me, maybe you can use the chat session, how many input statements are you going to use to write this program? How many input functions you are going to use? Second question, how many print functions you are going to use? How many inputs and how many outputs?
Excuse me, sir, are you sharing anything? What we can see is only the previous screen.
Yes, I think, yeah, it's only the shell. So let me show you the slides. Okay, sorry. Let me explain from the beginning. So this is the first program that we are going to write in Python. And in this program, we are going to get person name and a date of birth. And then we are going to print a message saying his person's name and the date of birth. So name, we are going to take it as two parts, first name and then last name, and then month, day, year individually. And finally, you form this output. Now the question I'm going to repeat again. Now to implement this program, how many print functions you need and how many input functions you need? So this is how the program works. So first of all, it will print a message, enter your first name. Let's say the user types Chuck. Then you ask last name, then user types Norris. And then you display, enter your date of birth, and it will request month. You provide the month, day, and then year. Finally, you have a message. Now my question is how many inputs and how many outputs, like how many input statements and how many print statements you need to develop this small program. Okay, first of all, can you take a screenshot and keep it with you, because I'm going to now demonstrate with the shell and also writing a script. So can you take a copy of this one? Right, so I have actually uploaded this code so that we could work together. Right, here is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a new one. So let's develop one at a time, right? So I'm going to share the screen, whole screen. Now you can see. So one side I have a new script, the other side I'm going to develop it. So let's start with the first one. Now first we want to develop, right? We want to request enter your first name and we want to get the output. So let's try with that one. We'll got one at a time. Right. The first one, right, I'm going to get a name for the user. So let's say I'm going to use a variable name, let's say first name. And then I'm going to say, okay, input, enter your first name, right? And then let me print first name. So let me run module. So I'm going to say this is program number 1. Okay, so here when I execute, you will see, okay, it lasts the first name. I'm going to say Chuck. You see, it will display Chuck. That's all I have. Right. Now let me extend this one. I'm going to get his last name as well. So I'll copy paste this one. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get his last name. Right. And then you are going to display both names. So if I rerun it, that's the first name. Right. And it's pay Chuck Norris. So hope you can now work on the problem. And I have shared the interface that I want to develop. Right. Can you quickly complete and share your code with us? If you have already finished, you can share the code in the chat. So let me develop together. So how can I put the third line? How can I put the third line? Can you tell me how to have this line in my code? which function I have to use. Just Kanil, what do you think? To get this third line, which Python function I have to use? So right now we have done with the first two lines. In first two lines, we are getting first name and last name. That means we have to use two input functions, right? We have used two input functions. Now I want to have the third line. Do I have to use a input function here as well? Okay, Manika posted his code. Good. The third line, simply we need to print a message, no inputs, right? So that means we can simply say, okay, print. We can say, okay, print. We can have a message, right? We can say, okay, enter your date of birth. That's all, right? Now, if I run this, so it will ask the first name, and then it will print the third line, then it will print Chuck Norris. So the next one, I have to get month, day, and year. So which means I have to use month. I can ask, okay, what is month? Day, and year. Now simply, I can have month, day, and year. Right, let me run module. So we are getting the first name, right? And then we can have Norris, date of birth, March, day 10, and 1940. Right, now we have only part of it. We have Chuck Norris, March 10, 1940. Now some parts are missing. What should I do now? I can add those parts were missing from here. Now, for example, the text that I want to have it, Chuck Norris was born on, this part was missing. March 10, comma, and then the full stop. So we have to have was born on, a comma, and a full stop. We need to add those three to the print statement. So let me go back. So here we have to say was born on, right? Then we have to say March 10, right? Then we need to have a comma, right? And finally, we need to have a full stop. I put a comma and full stop. So if I run module, let's see how this will work right now. So I'm going to say Chuck Norris, month is March 10, and then also you can have 1940. Right, so it says, okay, Chuck Norris was born on March. Okay, so there's a mistake. So it should be March 10 and comma and 1940. Right, so that means this should be come after day. So it should be like this. Now if I rerun, we are getting this one, but only exception here is we have a space, right? Any ideas how can I remove this comma? If you think carefully, you can simply do a modification. This is a string, this is a string. So simply you can have plus here. Because of strings, these two glued together. Similarly, this one here as well. You can similarly put a plus glued together. So if I rerun it, right? So we say we got clearly this one. The trick that I have used is these two variable, right? And with the comma, I actually concatenate them using plus, right? Here we have used plus here to concatenate these two. Otherwise, you can also use the things that we have discussed earlier. You have a formatting string, right? And then you can display. So for example, let me run using one way to do this, right? We can have a formatting string. First of all, we can put it like this. And to denote the string value, we can have S. We have not discussed this earlier. First name and then last name, was born on. Then we have month, we have date, comma, and we have year, full stop. Right. And then we have a string module operator, right? Then we can have first name, last name, month, day, and year. So if you rerun it, now you can see Chuck Norris, then March 10, 1940. So you see the same answer. So here the trick I have used is string concatenation. Second one, I have used all in string module operator. Right? Okay, if you have finished up to this point, can you please raise your hands? So in the second program, we are going to get two numbers from the user, and we are going to find the summation of the two numbers. So for example, if the user inputs 28 and 15, we are going to say a message, the sum of 20 plus 15 should be equal to 43. So in this one, we are going to get two numbers. So hopefully you can use two input functions. And the third one is the output. You can use a print statement to print it the way you want. Okay, with that one, I think with the time is also almost, we came to the end of the session for today. So we'll stop here. And if you have any questions, I would like to answer since we have a couple of more minutes. So those who couldn't finish it, so maybe you can do this during the break. And next week, we can look at the answer for this one. So the next week, we are going to look at the control structures. Basically, we will look at how selection, repetition structures available in Python. Like we are going to start with if statements, if, elif, that means else and if together. And then we will also look at the other looping construct like while loops, for loops, and so on. So that's the plan for our third session. Any questions, please? Okay, if you do not have any questions, please we'll stop for today. we'll meet again next week with another session on Python programming. And today we actually look at how the input and output process, right? So we look at basic input and output, and also formatted output, right? How exactly you are going to prepare data to be represented as exactly the way you want. Right, now having said that, we'll finish for today. If you have finished up to this point, you may leave the session. Thanks and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.